Hello, ninth grade history class. Hope everyone's doing okay. I hope things are going well for you. Thank you for the ones that have worked diligently, working hard on getting the little just thumbs up thing. Just wanted you to get a little encouragement from God's word. And then the day by day, uh, just this day in history. Andon was always good at getting that going. And so y'all seem to be excited about that. So I wanted to keep that going because not sure how long it'll be before we're back together. But I hope each and every one of you are doing okay, and the other classes are going fine as well. We're doing okay here. Miss seeing you, miss the fellowship together. Thank you for diligently working with World War II. World War II is a big part of what we study here in U.S. history, and honestly, some of the things we're seeing now with COVID-19, some of the with the grocery stores, with the panic, with the stock markets, with the money, with everything going on, reminds us of what took place in the 30s, as we see in our textbook. I want to do a little review. If you would please grab your textbook and have this with you. We're going to be going and doing a little review on 23. If we have time today, get to 24, but we might just do a little review on 23, and then tomorrow I'll be back with you for 24. But if anytime any questions, you got my number, and obviously a way through Teams to get in touch with me. All of us, for the most part, are getting our work completed. There's one or two of us that I don't know, for whatever reason, we're not getting things in. I encourage you, this is very important, to get this work in. These days that we have online are days that count for school. We're in the final 9 weeks. I believe I counted up, we have 6 weeks left of school and then exam week. So these are days that count, and your grades count. And I want you to do your very best. And I hope you are doing that in the other classes, and things are going okay for you. I do encourage you, if your church does not stream online, obviously our churches aren't meeting, but if your church is not doing anything online, I encourage you to go to Parks Crossroads Christian Church website, or go to Facebook and go to Parks Crossroads Christian Church there through Facebook, and you can see our pastor, Ransom Love. He does every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And then I get an opportunity to jump on there for Sunday school. And so if you want to see Tegan, Keenan, and Dean sing, they're doing okay as well. You can see them sing. And then I do the Sunday school lesson as well. But just want to encourage your hearts. And that's all we're wanting to do in these crazy times. But I do miss being with you, do miss seeing you, and hope you're doing okay. I want to go to show you what I'd like for you to look at first. We went over this before we got out. We were going through chapter 23. When you see these slides here, we were doing this together, going through this. We went through World War I, went through World War II, and I want you to get a little bit more understanding of that. Don't copy these down today. What we want us to do is for chapter 24, you'll have a piece of notebook paper and copying down the notes that you see in front of you. But for chapter 23, we're just going to go through and try to hit some of the highlights here. But your book, if you're following along, 538 in your textbook, 538 in your textbook. Now we see Cold War got underway, domestic reform, and life in post-war America. How was life after the war? People losing their jobs, people having to go off to war, women having to go into the workforce, kids being home from school, not being able to go to school. Athletic events were paused. Things were going on. The Olympics weren't happening. Well, guess what? That should sound familiar. 2020, just in 1 month's time, from the first week of March, I went up to the women's ACC tournament. Nothing was going on. Men's ACC tournament, things were running smoothly on Tuesday when I went. Wednesday, things started to be some rumors going on. And then Thursday, it was all closed at 12 noon. And then everything that's been shut down since then, NBA, Major League Baseball, the Olympics, a lot of things have come to a halt and not going on. We see Cold War domestic reform, life in post-war America. Truman became president in April 1945. So Harry S. Truman, I did a president's report on him in 6th grade. Don't know if y'all participated in those when you were in 6th grade, but I did, and it was Harry Truman. United Nations began 1945. People, representatives coming together to help not only each individual country, but then the entire world together. And the headquarters is in New York City. That's where we find that, and they still have that today. It's still going on today, and that began April 1945. Uh, just some of the ones that are involved with this United Nations: General Assembly, Security Council. Well, who's involved in that Security Council? Well, the United States, Russia, Britain, France, and China. You notice uh, there's certain countries that weren't getting along during World War II. That sort of, yes, a peace treaty was put in place, but there's still some bitter feelings, still some things going on that, some stinging, shall we say, that we see happening. As you remember, World War II came to an end with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There were some test explosions that took place, and then it went into effect. I think we might be able to use this, and it certainly was effective. The president that put that into place was Harry Truman. We see Secretariat there for us as well. Cold War, what does that consist of? What is that talking about? What does that mean? Period of tension and intense competition. USSR. Now, you know it as Russia today. You know the president is Vladimir Putin. Well, before we had USSR, Mikhail Gorbachev. He's the one with the birthmark on his forehead. And if you've seen pictures of him, and maybe I can get a picture and show it to you. Be able to look at that. I don't believe there's one in your book. No, there's not one in chapter 23. But we see the USSR, some tensions going on with the USSR during this Cold War time. And then leaders since then, Boris Yeltsin, and then they went away from being a communist into being a little bit more democracy, shall we say. Vladimir Putin is voted in by the people. He doesn't vote himself in, but he's been ruler there for quite a while, but it's not the communist country that it used to be. Still a little bit more about the Cold War, as referred to, as it says in your book on page 540, Iron Curtain, Eastern Europe, Soviet puppet governments, as you see there in front of you, and containment. I want to read a little bit to you from this book here. By this term, Cold War, this Bernard Baruch, which was the presidential advisor during this Cold War, meant that the U.S. and USSR entered a period of tension and intense competition. That's what this term of Cold War means. Although the two countries had been allies in World War II, as far as working together, and the Soviets, it received this Lend-Lease aid. The relationship had never been a cordial one. After the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, American troops had briefly intervened with the Allies in the Russian Civil War, helped out there on the side of the anti-communists. We've never gone to war to support communism. We've never gone to war to support communism. Every time we've gone to war for the country, it's always to help those that were against communistic teachings and communistic government, communistic dealings. So I just want to be clear on that. All right, we've never gone to war to say, hey, you're doing this correctly. You need communism. You need to support this. Let's do it. No. Vietnam War, we'll look at that later, same way, helping those that were against communistic teachings. Containment, well, let's first get the Iron Curtain. It was separating the communist East and the free West. I like this. It says, ironically, the Allies fought World War II over the fate of Eastern Europe, only to see it pass into totalitarian communist control. So we were trying to keep it from dictatorship control with Hitler, but then it wound up falling into communistic control. This containment, Truman responded to the Soviet presence in Eastern Europe with a policy of containment. That just definitely, it certainly just means unwilling to dislodge the Red Army through military action. All right, all this is going on in the mid-40s, 1945. Soviets withdrew from Iran, Greece, and Turkey, and Truman Doctrine is what we see take place here. Truman Doctrine talks about here the policy of aiding countries fighting communist takeovers, became known as the Truman Doctrine. Y'all went through this when you were reading through chapter 23, when you were answering questions when you were looking at application, you were learning about this then. And that work, just hang on to it, by the way. Just hang on to that work. Maybe we can get a time where we can either get together and you can send it to me, or just let me know, hey, it's completed. We could do it that way. I may just have you do it that way, in the same way as you do the thumbs up. Honesty, though, obviously. If you haven't done the work, then don't say you have. All right. We see Western Europe Marshall Plan. That's brought out for us a little bit in 541. The Marshall Plan, 1948, Congress passed the European Recovery Program. By 1951, in 3 years, the United States had spent $13 billion on restoring the economy of Western Europe. So we go to war. Do we leave them to themselves? Do we leave them to squander? Do we leave them to struggle? No, no. We spend $13 billion, and just think $13 billion. I don't know what that would be translated into our time. President Donald Trump just signed a 1.2 trillion, and I've got my numbers correct, 1.2 trillion or 2 trillion. A lot of money in order to get our country going a little bit more again, get our country heading in the right direction. And that's a lot of money. 13 billion is a lot of money in my thinking, in my knowledge of money. 13 million is a lot of money. But 13 billion in 1951 now, 1951, over 60 years. We go 61, 71, 81, 91, 01, 69 years. 69 years ago, we're spending 13 billion to restore, not United States, not to help us, but to help other countries in need. That leads us to NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You got there for you in front of you as NATO. That simply stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. A mutual defense pact. That's what we see here. United States Senate overwhelmingly ratified this 1950, and Dwight Eisenhower was put in the head of it. General Dwight Eisenhower was put to be the head of this. Underneath NATO, you see their Warsaw Pact. Warsaw Pact, 1955, communist countries of Europe, or Eastern Europe created this Warsaw Pact, military alliance to counter NATO. So you got NATO, and then the counter to that from the communist side was Warsaw Pact. All right. And then we see Berlin airlift. I wanted to read this to you here. Truman responded quickly with a massive airlift of food and supplies, getting what was needed. You go into Food Lion, you go into Walmart, you go into wherever, just save. And you're going to be hard pressed to find paper towels, toilet paper, Lysol, any type of cleaning supplies, milk. Just being able to find things. Walmart this morning in Ashboro, no milk. 6:45 this morning. So it's crazy how things are going. Some Walmarts are closing at 8, some earlier, and not opening up till the morning. But the things that are going on, the things that are happening, it's staggering to see that these same things happened during World War I, World War II. Some people are even going to make victory gardens. That should ring a bell. You learned about victory gardens in World War II, even World War I. People coming up and creating and making and fixing a garden in order to, yes, for them to eat, but then to be able to share it with other people. So these things are, even with all our modern technology, all the things we have today that we did not have in the 30s, that we did not have in the 40s, are going on right now today. And I'd like to even take it a step further. We're a Christian school, and I can speak freely about this. I feel strongly that we're getting a glimpse into the last days, when the Lord's going to return and come back, and God's going to say, son, go get my children. And just think how the world's going to be then. You think it's crazy now? You think it's nuts now with all things going on, all the people dying? Just think when the Lord comes back, his people are going to be gone. You and I that are Christians are going to be gone, and his hand is going to be off of this country. And just think how crazy things are going to go now. Well, let's look at 1949, an exciting date for me. That's when my dad was born, and so a cool year there. That's when my grandparents' house that they lived in, that's when it was built, and that's when they built it and moved in. That's where we all used to live, but now we live in the great metropolis of Ramseur. And so 1949 is a year that we see a year of shocks, things that are shocking. you've experienced things that are shocking. You've been a part of things. Well, that shocked me. I didn't know that was going to happen. Maybe you got a grade in math or a grade in science or history or English or whatever, and that's shocking. I didn't know I was going to get that. We see the communists gain control of mainland China. All right, communists gain control of mainland China. See a couple of names there that are interesting to pronounce: Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong, Chiang Kai-shek. Those are fun names to say. We see, despite progress in the Cold War with the Marshall Plan, the formation of NATO, these were things set up to not have communistic ruling spread, trying to get that stopped. But we see, and even the resolution of the Berlin crisis. In 1949, we see since the 20s, China had endured a civil war between the nationalists of this Chiang Kai-shek, and the communists of Mao Zedong. Okay, so we got Mao Zedong wants communistic rule, communistic teaching, and Chiang Kai-shek is more, say, us, wanting things to be more free. World War II interrupted their fighting as they battled the Japanese. So World War II got in the way of this fighting and went into something bigger. We're fighting a different country, we're fighting Japanese, fighting Japan. And of course, we know we got in 1941. We were thrown in the mix. December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, just like September 11th, 2001 is a day that will live in infamy, never to be forgotten. The United States supported the nationalists with $2 billion in aid from 1945 to 1949. So we're spending money with ease, it seems, in the 40s as we are today in 2020 when we're throwing out trillions of dollars to be able to help our economy and sending money to families that are in need. This brings us up to well, it finishes off here with the hydrogen bomb, the H-bomb, popular known as, finally developed in 1952. It had the explosive power hundreds of times greater. Listen to this. The H-bomb was so powerful, hundreds of times powerful than what was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's amazing. The power of an explosive power. Within a year, Soviet Union revealed that it too had developed hydrogen bombs. So not only the United States, but the Soviet Union. So this is where we get this Cold War. So we get this tugging back and forth. We've got power. Now we've got power. We've created this hydrogen bomb greater than the atomic bomb. Oh, well, we have too. Let's fast forward 2020. Iran, Syria, even during the Gulf War, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait. We were dealing with who has nuclear wars, who has gas war. So you do? Well, where is it? You've got this. Okay, let us go see. You need to give this up. And they didn't. Saddam Hussein was stubborn, and we went to war. Here, we see its hydrogen bomb, explosive power that we don't want to have unleashed on anyone. The Korean War is what we get to and move to next, but let's finish up here. I got ahead of myself with the slides. Year of shocks, 1949. Also, Soviets detonate first atomic bomb. So they go and detonate it after we did, so they wanted to stay ahead of the game. Both US and USSR, as we just said, would develop an H-bomb more powerful than what we see with the atomic bomb. All right, we see the Korean War. So what we enter into next, this Korean War. If you've ever watched the TV show MASH, some like it, some don't. Now that's dealing more with the hospital, dealing more with the medical side of it than, say, the fighting actual combat. But that was a TV show geared to show light a little bit on the medical side of the Korean War. Okay, it was fought at the 38th parallel. Douglas MacArthur was a great general that was a part of that. We're going to look at some things there. His picture's on page 552. This 38th parallel is of latitude in the communist North Korea and non-communist South Korea. So communistic North Korea, non-communistic South Korea, and they're at odds with each other. We're going to see this with North Vietnam and South Vietnam a little bit later in the 60s. Okay, the neat thing about this Bob Jones curriculum, they go to the 4th edition. We have here just the 3rd edition in our book. And so we'll get to go a little bit further into, say, our history, because the current book we have stops at 2001. So if time permits, we'll go a little bit further and take care of a little bit more. America's hero of the Pacific in World War II is this Douglas MacArthur general. He was in charge of the United Nations military forces. He was put in charge there on June 25th, summertime, 1950. The communist North invaded the South in an attempt to unite the peninsula under communist rule. So communistic North they got greedy. They weren't just happy with controlling their area. They wanted to go and take something that wasn't there, South Korea, and they went and invaded them. And so that started the war. It did not go to a world war. Didn't go to a world war. And we see that we come into play and help out. Truman reacted boldly to this aggression. Rather than ask Congress for a declaration of war, the president worked through the Soviet Council of the U.S. and the USSR, which could have vetoed the action, temporarily absent in protest of America's refusal to recognize the government of communist China. So he didn't go through the Congress. He went quickly in trying to get us, the United States, involved in helping Korea and getting South Korea freed and to get them out of harm's way and get North Korea back to where they belong. The picture there on page 543 for you in your textbook says American troops advance on communist forces in the Korean conflict in June 1951. So that lets you know we did not take a long time in getting into this war. June 25th, 1950, North invades South, and then we're already on soil. We're already doing things October of 50. So July, August, and October. In about 4 months, we are involved in helping out South Korea because we believed in about the same way and handled things in the same fashion and format as South Korea. MacArthur, however, it says reverse the situation by a brilliant maneuver like this. Taking advantage of a superior air and naval power, MacArthur launched an amphibious invasion behind North Korea lines at Incheon seaport halfway up western coast of Korea. So we had a strong air and naval, stronger army than Korea put together, but we remember we're fighting with South Korea against North Korea, and so we were able to, with a little sneak attack or a little bit of strategery, maneuvered ourselves and used our power to fight against communistic rule. And you see there with China enters the conflict, they go in and help out as well. Let's see, I want to bring this to you. His success had an unexpected effect, however. Communist China intervened in the conflict, sending thousands of troops into North Korea. So China goes to North Korea because they're communistic based. So you got China and North Korea. So that's a superpower now. You got United States and South Korea forming a superpower going against each other. Thankfully, this didn't become a world war, but we had countries struggling. Germany, I'm pretty sure, would not have had much to have thrown out there because they were just destroyed. Japan, we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki and sent a message to them. And so they're trying to recover. Germany's trying to recover. And if it wouldn't have been for that, this possibly could have been a world war and have been World War III. Okay. We see this limited war that you see there. That's underneath the picture on page 543. A war with a limited objective short of total victory over the enemy. Calling war with China, it says here a gigantic booby trap. As far as you get yourself involved, get yourself in trouble if you move further. Truman refused to expand the conflict and risk as he thought. He was afraid if he was to extend this and say, well, now you've done it, China, we're going to go and take care of you. This would have started a World War III. That's what Truman was afraid of, and so did not pursue that. Well, let's say it was 33,000. Yeah. Fighting continued for 2 years until a truce was reached on July 27, 1953. So from June 25th, 1951, when North Korea invaded South Korea, we fight. We're there in about 3-4 months, and then a truce 2 years later, 2 years and a month. July 27th, 1953. I've got some great uncles that fought in the Korean War, some family members that fought in the Korean War. Thankful for their service. And we see that more than 33,000 Americans died in the war that left the boundary between North and South Korea about where it was before the war began. So it had some headway, didn't completely say, well, that's a victory. We didn't annihilate the North, but just kind of put them back across the border, get South Korea back to their side. That'd be like if United States and Mexico went to war. We might not, and we've had that before. We fought over land, if you remember, Mexican-American War. But we basically got them back to their border and maybe made them happy. And then we got ourselves back across our border, making us happy. And then we're going to maybe agree to disagree, okay? Agree to disagree. Korean War again has MacArthur relieved of command. He was relieved of his duties. All right. Thought I had something I was going to share with you about that, but that'll be good enough for that. If I come to it, I'll go back to it. But relieved of command, a truce reached in 1953 that we see there. April 19th, 1951. That's what I was going to tell you. Truman dismissed General MacArthur of his duties, and he gave a speech April 19th, 1951 to a Joint Chief of Staff. 52 years of military service. Incredible. And he ends it with this. I want to read this to you, part of his speech. I now close my military career and just fade away, an old soldier who tried to do his duty as God gave him the light to see that duty. And he says goodbye. So that was his little farewell address. And truce reached, as we said, July 27th, 1953. It took them a little while to come up with this truce, but they were able to reach a settlement. Communism. Eisenhower and Kennedy had goal of peaceful coexistence, different from a goal of total victory. So Eisenhower says here, 1952, Truman did not seek re-election because of the unpopularity of the Korean War. America did not approve of this. Americans did not like this. A lot of people were against us going to Korea and saying, why are we going over there? Why are we fighting over there? What have they done to us? Remember, World War I, we got in it because of the sinking of Lusitania. American lives were lost. World War II, the bombing of Pearl Harbor on that Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941. So we got involved in the war that way. It was an attack on us. Did South Korea or North Korea attack the United States? No. North Korea invaded South Korea June 25th, 1951, and then we, 4 months later, aggressively got involved, and it was unpopular. And so Truman did not seek re-election. Dwight Eisenhower became chief executive. After 2 terms, he was followed by Kennedy, John Kennedy. So that's what we see in our succession of those in charge. So once Truman, who was trying to get total victory and annihilate communism, Dwight Eisenhower, and John F. Kennedy came on the scene and said, hey, let's just have a peaceful coexistence. Let's just try to get along, okay? And then difference from a goal of total victory. I want us to maybe get to 3 more slides here. Indochina, communism, Ho Chi Minh, one of my favorite things to pronounce, Ho Chi Minh City, where Ho Chi Minh is a communistic leader, and he will be named, there'll be a city named after him over in Vietnam, in Vietnam War, Ho Chi Minh City. So we'll don't jump ahead of ourselves. Frozen Chosin is something that I hope you got to read. That's on page 554. Some of the entrance of the Red Chinese forces in the Korean War caught MacArthur's army dangerously off guard. If you could read that, that'd be great. If you were to read that. The withdrawal took 14 days, and the Chinese contested almost every foot of the more than 50 miles from the reservoir of Hungdam. 13,000 casualties. There was a lot of casualties there, and then the Marines suffered, just the Marines, 13,000, and then a total of 37,500 casualties. All right, and it was called that because during the winter time, the frozen Chosin, and China and North Korea really put a tight grip on our forces, on our troops. Indochina, one Cold War trouble spot, says here, was the Asian territory known as Indochina. France had controlled this. France had controlled Indochina from the middle of the 19th century until Japan captured it during World War II. So again, 19th century. 19th century is 1800s. 20th century is anything 1900 to 1999. Then we get to 2000s, 21st century. Okay, so 21st century is what we're in today with 2020. All right, so we see Ho Chi Minh is a communistic ruler, successfully conducted a guerrilla warfare against the French. Battle of, you got the name there, Dien Bien Phu. Dien Bien Phu, 1954. The United States had sent limited economic aid to France, but had rejected sending military aid. We said, we'll send you financial aid, but no military aid. Domino theory. We see the domino theory there on the last piece there of communism on this slide. Domino theory. One non-communist nation in Southeast Asia fell to communism. Right, one after another, it seems. One after another is domino theory. Eisenhower's rationale, all right, in trying to defeat this. Cuba, we all have heard of the name Fidel Castro. We'll end here talking about him today. Fidel Castro, Batista, Bay of Pigs, Cuban Missile Crisis. We see it on page 545, brought communism to the Western Hemisphere. Communism had never come to the Western Hemisphere. It had always been China, North Korea, always those over toward the east. It was not over here in the west where we are. Communistic rule. All right, so we see this is brought 1959. He overthrew the Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. Fulgencio Batista is overtaken, so Castro takes over Batista in 1959, and then sets up rule here, and then ruled until he died. He ruled 50 plus years as the ruler. Just think if we had a president in the United States that went to the White House and 50 years later, he was still a president. We get bent out of shape after 4 years, man. Or with Donald Trump, wow, our country gets bent out of shape in the first week, even leading up to the election. So just think if it was 50 years of a ruler, wow, that would be crazy, wouldn't it? We see Fidel Castro rationalized foreign-owned property and signed a trade agreement with the Soviet Union. President Eisenhower responded with trade sanctions. So we got Eisenhower and Fidel Castro going at it at the beginning. John F. Kennedy is going to get a little bit more involved. That was pretty much the only war or battle, if you want to put it that way, that John F. Kennedy got involved in before his assassination was with Bay of Pigs. Ended in total failure after 3 days of struggle. April 19, 1961, the CIA invaded Cuba. We were trying to get here, trying to take over not only this communistic rule, but trying to make sure this Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't going to get any further. You got missiles, Cuba. We don't want you firing on Miami, Florida. There was only like 90 miles from Florida, and they could have sent those missiles to the United States. Well, we go in and try to take care of business. Well, ultimate failure, huge failure, 3 days, and it's not good. An embarrassment for John F. Kennedy. He says, victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeat is an orphan. In defeat, you're looked at as being someone not wanted. It's not good. It's not time for celebration. Communism, we see Berlin Wall. Refugees have been escaping to the West Berlin, and we're going to finish off with here, this Berlin Wall. My mother-in-law was a part of this. She was living in Germany, and she was separated when the Berlin Wall separated East Germany from West Germany. That wall went up. Those family members she never got to see again, and found out later once the wall came down in 1989, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was 1989 when that wall was taken down. Then you find out, oh, so-and-so's passed away. Oh, so-and-so's not with us anymore. So I want you to look at page 546 today. Look over that and read that. Different ways people were trying to get in. Different ways people were trying to escape. Okay? And then I want to read to you tomorrow. We're going to start with tomorrow, escaping East Berlin. 28 years. 28 years this wall separated family members. Just think today, for the rest of the day, think about this Berlin Wall. How would you feel as a ninth grader being separated for 28 years from a family member? That wouldn't be good. that grandma, grandpa might not make it until you get to see them again. They might pass away. Uh, and so just think about that. How would you have felt if you'd have been a part of this Berlin Wall? You'd have tried to have escaped. And some tried and failed, and it was met with their death. Well, that's all for today. Look forward to being with you tomorrow. Continue, if you haven't gotten that work done from the first week where you were just going through working on the questions and reading, make sure to get that completed. And please make sure you're getting things done on time with posting and with writing. And I hope we learned a little bit about World War II last week, a little bit more in depth. I'll put some more of those activities up because that is a big event that if you can grasp and have hold of what went on there, you will, like me, be able to see the correlation between what's going on today in 2020 and then go back to what went on in the 30s and 40s. Hope you have a great day. If you ever have any questions, please let me know with Teams. All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.